not that effective against the Aura's deck because they can just present so many threats over and over again. In fact, maybe that's a few too many in the opening hand there. So a solid mulligan from Ron. But overall, the mono black deck is going to have its most success if it plays like an aggro deck and not so much like a control deck.
Well, we're going to see hand disruption back on the menu. As Ailey put it, you're going to see a lot more of this with Brainstorm going on the suspend list. All of a sudden, people who are into Thoughtseize and Inquisition and cards like this are, well, let's just say they're empowered once again. And in fact, both players playing black in the tournament here. As you can see, a nice double 1-drop turn 2 here, though, for Torres.
And here you're seeing kind of the downside of the Aura's deck, where Ron had to mulligan an opening hand. It was a one-lander, wasn't going anywhere. But facing down 2 attacking creatures here with 3 auras in hand and nothing to play, and that's just something that happens where you don't draw a SRAM or a Core Spirit Dancer, and all of a sudden you've got tons of auras but nowhere to go, whereas Bernardo's got about the ideal start of discard spell into double 1-drop.
Yeah, and the window may be closed at this point here for Ron. You have to figure that if he can find one of those creatures next turn to start putting stuff on, there could be a chance for him to scrap back in. But boy, he really has a short window to hit here.
Lurrus could have potentially helped as well. Obviously, a Thoughtseize is going to put paid to that. But Lurrus plus Kaya's Ghost Form is actually a really strong combo because if the Lurrus dies, the Ghost Form brings it back, and then you can replay the Ghost Form off Lurrus. So a nice little loop there as a blocker. But yeah, this game is effectively over.
Right. So we're going to probably see the GG here from Ron Branchaud as, he just hasn't found a single creature to actually put anything on. And that means that the Aura's deck has a handful of nothing. And in fact, yes, game number 1 goes to Bernardo Torres, just tearing through Ron there, taking advantage of his situation there. It can be a bit of a glass casket, right? When the Aura's deck goes off, it looks like the best thing going, but here, or a glass cannon, I should say. But yeah,
I was hoping that was
maybe I was more accurate, actually.
But yes, given the way that game turned out, a casket is, of course, a better comparison. Mm-hmm. And, that's kind of what you sign up for when you play Auras. You often win these like crushingly fast games where you play a Core Spirit Dancer, put 3 Auras on it, and then that's it. But you also sometimes mulligan and never draw a SRAM or a Spirit Dancer or get one Thoughtseized and just actually never cast a spell. Ron Branchaud never cast a spell that game.
Right. And and if like you said, though, that is part of the deal, right? There's a level of frustration you can feel if you don't get to cast a spell in a game of Magic. But when you bring this particular deck to the field, that does happen occasionally, and you just kind of move on and shuffle up for game number 2. As we see sideboard plans here coming in, what do we see? Spawn of Mayhem and Gutterbones leaving in favor of removal spells here for Bernardo.
Yeah, 6 removal spells. Of note, Legion's End can be particularly brutal because you could snag 2 copies of the same 2-drop. Mm-hmm. But all the mono black deck is doing is getting a bunch more removal and just having more ways to interact with the Aura's plan.
What is the game plan here for Bernardo? He's going to be able to up his interaction, but as we've seen from this Aura's deck, you need to slam the door on the game versus them, because even if you kill their stuff, it will come back. They have ways to bring creatures back. They have Lurrus, and we've seen their ability to be quite resilient in the face of removal.
You need to do exactly what Bernardo did, which was have a little bit of disruption and then a fast clock. The clock is key. And in fact, drawing that Knight of the Ebon Legion on turn 1 is going to go a long way, though I suppose a Mire's Grasp does handle it immediately. Because if given enough time, they're going to cast Claim to Fame and they're going to land a Kaya's Ghost Form, and then they've got their engine rolling. And, we might see some aspect of that now, though. Ron kept a 2-land hand without a SRAM or a Spirit Dancer, drew a SRAM, but now is in a tough spot, and I like this play. Choosing not to play an unprotected SRAM and instead, thinking about casting that Heliod's Punishment to lock down the Skyclave Shade for a few turns. The reason I think that's good is you really want to go SRAM and immediately play an Aura, ideally Sentinel's Eyes, because even if Bernardo has a removal spell, you still got that card off of that Aura, and that gives you a little bit of a chance to hit a Claim to Fame or a Spirit Dancer or another SRAM, because you have to assume that Bernardo's going to kill your SRAM on sight. In fact, that's what would happen if Ron played a SRAM. So this is a kind of funny play, but it's a heads up one. Ron is going to put Angelic Gift on the opposing Skyclave Shade as just a cycling card because Angelic Gift draws a card. And Bernardo can't really do anything about that unless he wants to Fatal Push, which, as counterintuitive as it sounds, might actually work out because it'll deny the card draw from Angelic Gift and it'll also let you replay the Skyclave Shade from the graveyard.
Bernardo couldn't bring himself to commit such a crime against value and decided just to let it happen.
Yeah,
he now has a flying Skyclave Shade that can't do anything currently.
Well, and I think that was a reasonable play, especially because you knew that you were going to cast Rankle next turn, and that will use up all your mana, so you weren't even going to replay the Shade anyway. Ron did draw a land off of that Angelic Gift play, which worked out pretty nicely, so we might actually see him get off to the races here.
Yeah, we're finally going to get to see Ron get a little bit of the game plan rolling here with SRAM directly into Cartouche. And that'll get him a card back. And in fact, it got him a core Spirit Dancer. So he's at 17 life. He is facing down a Rankle and at some point a Skyclave Shade. But yeah, he's got a little bit of breathing room here. And we could see him start to really go off, particularly if he can get that Spirit Dancer down and then start casting those auras. You know, he'll never run out of cards.
And that's the thing, is this deck kind of just, it's like once it gets momentum, really hard to stop it because every card you draw is a pretty high chance of being another aura. And once you get 2 Spirit Dancer effects down and you're drawing 2 cards per aura, at that point you basically can't run out. You're only constrained on mana.
Exactly. We see Rankle forcing discards here. Once again, it's another Sentinel's Eyes going into the graveyard here for Ron. So he'll be able to bring those back at some point, assuming he is able to survive. And as we see, the Skyclave Shade is now going to come back as well. A sequence that you described a few turns ago. Here's Core Spirit Dancer, though, ready to hit the battlefield. There's another Cartouche in hand, as well as a Legion's End, prompting a bit of a decision here for Ron. And he's going to go for the Cartouche.
And Cartouche is nice because it gets you an additional blocker if it lands. Unfortunately for Ron, the last card in Bernardo's hand was Fatal Push. And these are the games you win as the mono black player. In fact, Looks like Bernardo is poised to do just that, especially with that Faceless Haven. So being able to disrupt Ron just enough, Ron, to take advantage of Ron's poor draws. Both of Ron's draws were a little bit below average, or well below average in the case of the first hand. But again, that's kind of what you sign up for when it comes to the Auras deck. It is feast or famine, and you got to do your best to take advantage of the famine games.
That's right. He needed another turn here to be able to get Lurrus going, and Bernardo had that perfect mix of disruption and pressure to just close the door here. I mean, we got to see Ron do some of the things that he's trying to do with the deck. He did play 2 different of his key creatures in consecutive turns, but it was not enough, as we saw answers there, and eventually a swift 2-0 victory there for Bernardo Torres, and he made it look easy, Luis.
Oh, when the Auras deck stumbles, Mono Black is often going to be there to pick up the pieces, because the Mono Black deck, that's a consistent deck. It does basically the same thing every time, which is to combine early creatures and Thought Seizes and Fatal Pushes, and that's what we saw.
Yeah, and that's exactly how that's going to go for Bernardo Torres if he keeps facing matchups similar to this. I am curious, though. We've seen Mono Black perform really well here in the first 2 rounds. What are the matchups that it doesn't want to see?
That can be tough. Jund Food is something that Mono Black, I think, can struggle with, because Jund Food has a lot of ways to put value on the board, and in particular, the Cat Oven combo makes it hard for you to get damage through on the ground. And then I always liked the Jeskai control against Mono Black matchup, but losing Brainstorm was a pretty big hit there, because you're playing against a Thoughtseize Inquisition deck, and that's where Brainstorm's typically at its best. But still, Lightning Helix and Expressive Iteration are very strong against the Mono Black deck. So we'll see. Mono Black is a pretty well-rounded deck, doesn't tend to have very extreme matchups, and that can make it a good choice if you can get the field right.
Right, and I'm really curious to see if that's how things line up, right? As we know here, right, this is going to be, at least this one is going to be a tournament against Jeskai, right? It's over 40% of the field. So if that's the matchup that you have, then that's what you want. Yeah, so I'm curious to see if that goes the way that Bernardo is wanting it to go or not. And of course, on the other side, the Auras deck is hoping to play maybe against a deck that has a little bit more skewed towards either disruption or speed rather than the really kind of perfect combo that he found out there.
I have a question though, Marshall.
Yes.
How does it feel to be the lone holdout who voted for mono black and it just showed all the rest of us?
Oh, it feels fantastic. My beautiful plan is in place. I was like, all right, let's go against the grain because I got to catch up after that really bad pick in the first round. Like, what was I thinking picking Dragonstorm against that Archon deck?
Oh, I don't know. I looked at both deck lists and immediately was like, well, the Dragonstorm deck can never win. But that's how the cookie crumbles sometimes.
Okay, it sounds like we're going to take a break, so we'll take a short break. We'll be back with more from the Challenger Gauntlet right after this. And welcome back to coverage here of the Challenger Gauntlet. Marshall Sutcliffe with Luis Scott Vargas. Thank you so much for joining us. We've got another match to bring you here. Not you, not you, Luis. The viewers. Thanking the viewers. We've got another match to bring you here, and it's a really cool one. Sam Rolph has brought Arcanist to the table, and this is a deck that is, kind of waned and waxed in favor as we've seen over the time, but it's a really cool deck that's kind of specific to the format. It's not one you see very much often elsewhere. There's also Jeskai in the hands of João Moreira, and this is an interesting one. Sam deciding to go against the grain a bit, even against his own team's decisions, and bringing this deck because he really feels strongly, A, that he knows it well, and B, I think he thinks he can beat Jeskai with it.
Well, Rakdos Arcanist kind of fell off the map when Brainstorm was added to the format because, again, a mid-range Thoughtseize deck really doesn't want to see Brainstorm. It's just not a good matchup. But now that Brainstorm's gone, I totally understand why Rakdos Arcanist has a lot more appeal. And, kind of the narrative we got was that Sam likes this matchup. His teammates were less confident in their ability to kind of navigate it because it's not an easy one. You've got a ton of different one-ofs. You've got a lot of different options. You can play cards from your graveyard. You can flash things back. You have claim to fames to give your Arcanists haste. You have Croxas. All these things add up to a lot of micro decisions, and your goal is to disrupt the Jeskai deck enough that they're unable to land one of their big spells like Torrential Gearhulk or Mizzix Mastery on Magma Opus. Because if a Magma Opus goes in the stack, it's pretty hard for the red-black deck to actually win, because that just undoes, 3-4 cards of disruption. But it's a clunky combo, and a handful of Thoughtseizes and Dreadhorde Arcanists, like Sam appears to have, I mean, that can just pick apart your plan from the start.
What does the game end look like if Sam wins? Like, what is the finisher for him?
The finisher is getting his opponent down to no relevant cards, or, like, for example, here, Thoughtseize on a Lightning Helix is what we're going to see to start out with. And then pressing that advantage, but with all these, like, Young Pyromancer making tokens, or Arcanist effectively drawing a card or putting up a card every time it attacks. And you do that enough times, and then you clear the path for, like, a Kroxa or a bunch of tokens attacking with the Pyromancer. And you need to keep Jeskai off balance, because at the end of the day, we've seen this play out time and time again. Discard decks don't get to stop the top of the opponent's deck. If you make the opponent discard and then they draw a good card, you don't really have any recourse.
Exactly. All right. Well, let's see how this plays out here. You can see on the bottom part of your screen a bit of a clunky opener here for João with the 4 mana, 5 mana, 5 mana, 8 mana, but we've also seen the kind of 2-3 punch, right, of Magma Opus discarded into Mizzix's Mastery.
I mean, at this point, Sam knows what just happened. Discard spells don't have protection from the top of the deck. He drew Mizzix Mastery immediately, and this is a turn 3 Magma Opus.
Wow.
Through a turn 1 Thoughtseize, and that's just game, and Sam just can't believe it.
Sam Rolph he's just like, are you serious right now? Yeah, this is how it goes. That was really the disaster scenario there for Sam, as he's going to lose his Arcanist. I mean, he was ready to roll the perfect opener there, tearing apart the hand of João, and it's just completely fallen apart for him. Now he's facing down a 4/4, and he's lost his Arcanist.
And before this Opus, those 2 Teferis were going to be something Sam could just eventually deal with by flashing back Thoughtseize off Arcanist or putting enough threats into play. Now he's got this 4/4. He's behind on board, isn't going to be in a position to, like, at his leisure, pick apart João's hand, and those Teferis are going to come play. There's also another Magma Opus, meaning another Mizzix Mastery draw would be good, or even a Torrential Gearhulk. And then sometimes you just end up hard casting Magma Opus if the game drags on too long.
Okay, now this is a nice thing, though, for Sam, right? He gets the Young Pyromancer down, he kills the 4/4, he gets a 1/1 off the deal, and maybe he can string together enough cards to just kind of go wide here and make it so that even a card as powerful as Teferi isn't enough to get the job done against Young Pyromancer and friends.
Well, this turn may demonstrate the power of the Rakdos Arcanist deck. Getting to cast Claim to put the Arcanist back into play, and then Fame to give it haste, could line up another Thoughtseize plus a big attack, plus you get 3 tokens off Young Pyromancer. That's a lot of value, and it makes the board such that Teferi is not going to help much. On the other hand, just having access to another Magma Opus and then maybe even the cycling off Ragran Triumph means that João is going to have plenty of turns to find something. And looks like Sam is not going to go for that play, perhaps fearing something like Lightning Helix, which would disrupt that play a ton. Sam now thinking here maybe about a Kolaghan's Command is what it looks like.
Does seem to be the case.
And possibly just getting that Luris back into hand. That is another option. I mean, and this is what I'm talking about. The Arcanist deck has a bunch of different options at pretty much every point in the game.
Yeah, there's a lot of play to this. I think this was part of the reason why Sam decided to bring this one. He again went against the grain of the rest of his team because he felt like he could navigate with this deck even against this exact matchup. And let's see if he can prove himself right here. He kind of bet on himself.
And Sam took a more conservative line here because he did use the Claim to get back the Arcanist, but decided not to use Fame to try to give it haste, fearing perhaps something like Lightning Helix. But at the end of the day, that does open the door a little bit for Jeskai to get onto the board without getting thought seized. But yeah, Teferi is one of your best cards when the board's clear, you're ahead. Not that powerful when you're behind. 5 mana cycling or 5 mana put an Arcanist back on top of the deck. Neither of those things is all that exciting.
Another Teferi off the top of the library for João, and it looks pretty tough here.
What he's looking for is a sweeper or Mizzix Mastery or a Torrential Gearhulk, something that can put a lot onto the board. Right now, just casting a Teferi is not that appealing. It's possible he's going to want to do something like Prismari Command, kill Young Pyromancer, draw 2, discard 2 to just find something else besides a whole grip of Teferis.
Yeah, that does seem fine. I mean, he has a lot of life total to play with here. He's at 15. If he takes the Pyromancer out of the equation, he's only facing down 3, maybe 4 power if there's a response here from Sam. And he'll have a little bit of time to work.
And that is one thing the Arcanist deck doesn't do is end the game that quickly. Like this is real pressure. This isn't nothing. But you're not killing your opponent on turn 5. You're killing them on turn 7. So João does have another turn or two to kind of put something together.
Well, it looks like he's going to take a different line here. He did play that land untap, so that does signify Teferi here of Dominaria is going to hit the battlefield. The other line of thinking here could just be, well, if I play Teferi, this is going to cause Sam to have to decide, right? Because Teferi's going to get me a card deeper, which is, half of what he would have got off of the Prismari command, and Sam may just have to dedicate a bunch of resources. And look at that, Anger of the Gods right off the top there, Luis. Now, is that where he wants it?
No, it's not. Because very, very likely to get thought seized on this next turn thanks to the Arcanist.
Brutal.
Oh, and wow, Sam showing a lot of patience there. Declined to use Kolagon's command, which, I mean, he basically left 3 mana on the table that he's never going to get back, and is also, just going right after Teferi. So Sam playing for the long game here. But as funny as that is, it's not working out all that poorly. He's clearly going to take Anger of the Gods here, given that it wipes his whole board, and then kind of puts his opponent in the same spot where, yeah, you can cast a Teferi, but I'm just going to kill it again. And each turn, the Arcanist deck is making a little bit more progress than the Jeskai deck.
Yeah, this is really going to come down to João finding a sweeper that he can actually draw and cast in the same turn, or at least be able to untap with it, as he's just not going to be able to make any headway. As we see Anger of the Gods get thought seized away here. Now, this is enough to kill Teferi, right? There's 5 there. Yeah, so that's going to kill Teferi. So Teferi basically just drew a card and soaked up 5 damage. Down to 13.
Really 3 damage if you take into account the steam vents that João had to play untapped.
Yeah, good point. So, now what here for Sam?
And once again, Sam has a bunch of mana and can put Luris into hand, can leave up Kolagon's command. Has just decided to kind of leave up mana again.
Magma Opus is going to hit the bin here. There's a Ragran Chime off the top of the library, though, for João, and he's just going to run out another Teferi. Is this is this what we're going to see from him? Just hoping to find something over and over again.
Well, this turn it's a little bit more appealing because you're going to get to cast a Prismari command after you untap those 2 lands, which means that if Sam goes to kill Teferi with 5 power worth of attackers, you could do something like Prismari command the Young Pyromancer, prevent 2 of that damage. As it turns out, Sam does have that Kolagon's command he's been sitting on, but it's still you make a little bit more progress with that Prismari command than last turn where all you did was cast Teferi.
Yeah, it does look like Sam's queuing up the Kolagon's command. He has some interesting options with that as well. He could make João discard a card, but he could also blow up a treasure, ding Teferi to make sure he goes away. He looks like he's going to go for card plus ding the treasure.
Yeah, it's kind of funny that it's not something that comes up very often, but in this particular case, by killing the treasure end of turn with Teferi's ability on the stack, that's actually still going to give João the opportunity to cast Prismari Command, because he's getting to float the treasure man and untap the 2 lands. And, it's going to give him a little bit of a window to kind of try to get back into this, though still quite far behind against Sam.
Yeah, interesting too. Taking him off the treasure means that a Magma Opus wouldn't be able to be cast next turn. Also, interestingly, making him discard a card does make Prismari Command look a little worse, right? Like with the draw 2, discard 2, if that's part of the game plan here.
Definitely. It's going to mean that a Prismari Command is going to, leave João with 1 card in hand if he chooses the draw 2 discard mode. It's possible that given that, he just chooses to kill Young Pyromancer and make a treasure and just maybe play for a more expensive spell. Though either way, you're not going to be able to cast a kicked or a mastery or a overloaded Mizzix Mastery. So I don't know that the treasure is going to help all that much.
Right. And here comes the Prismari Command. So let's see what he wants to do. The 2 damage to the Young Pyromancer seems requisite at this point. And yeah, he's just going to go ahead and replace that treasure token and pass the turn back. Now, the downside here, of course, for João is that he is now facing down 5 power. So Teferi is once again on the chopping block.
Very close to lethal here, because Fame on the Arcanist makes it 3 power, which is enough to flashback Golagon's command. But we're still just going to see takedown of Teferi plus incidental damage getting in, and it's just going to be top deck mode, which is, this is how this matchup's going to end in a lot of most games, where does the Jeskai deck top deck a Gear Hulk or Anger of the Gods or a Mizzix Mastery? If so, then they can get themselves into a pretty commanding position. If not, as we see here, just going to die.
And there we go. Hollowed Fountain off the top of the library. Now, there is a Castle Ardenvale. Is that enough to not die here?
As things currently stand, Sam is a little bit short of lethal, yes.
Okay, so maybe one more draw step here for João, and if he can find something.
Well, it's up to 8 mana now, so
yeah,
an overloaded Mizzix Mastery with Anger of the Gods, Lightning Helix, and a Magma Opus in the graveyard, that would definitely turn the tides, yes.
Wow. Let's see if he can find it. Here's Village Rites from Sam. I wonder if there's a way for Sam to get the job done this turn. He knows that the way is clear outside of the 1/1 token that will be generated here. And it looks like no.
Hive of the Eye Tyrant is a cute addition to the deck, by the way.
Oh yeah, that's a nice one. Yeah, those creature lands from AFR seem pretty pushed. I wouldn't be surprised if we see those around for quite a while. Okay, João's going to try to maintain as much life total as possible. In this case, it ends up being 5. He's empty-handed. Another couple of threats there for Sam, but doesn't seem like a great reason to throw those onto the battlefield. The Hive of the Eye Tyrant doing a good job here, and João's going to need to find one of his very heavy hitters to get his way out of this mess.
It's starting to turn into Mizzix Mastery or bust, because even a sweeper here, I don't think would actually put João in a position where he could potentially win.
That's right, and he's going to end up scooping him up after finding nothing good off the top of the library. And we're going to head into sideboards for our players here. Taking a look at the sideboard here for Sam. Lots of one-ofs, a couple of Fries, a couple of Soul Guide Lanterns, a couple of Duress.
It's really funny that when most people look at a deck list that's like all 4-ofs, they think, wow, what a tight, well-tuned deck list. When I see a deck list that's like all 1-ofs and 2-ofs, that actually signifies to me that the player has spent a lot of time on their deck, because you don't get to one, Feed the Swarm or one Soul Guide Lantern just by accident. You don't just do it because you feel like it. You do it because you've played a lot and you've decided, I want exactly one of this effect.
Looks like he just kind of trims a bunch of stuff coming out, some removal spells primarily.
Yeah. João has I think a more impressive sideboard for the matchup with portable holes as good removal spells, and then another Anger, Soul Guide Lantern. Some fairly good disruptive elements.
And I saw a Go Blank in Sam's sideboard, but it looks like he's not interested in it. That seems like that would be sweet.
Go Blank is primarily for the Is It Phoenix decks. It really makes it difficult for them to bring back Phoenix with any regularity. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I wouldn't have been shocked to bring it in here, though maybe in anticipation, because the players, of course, have access to deck lists. João took out a couple Mizzix Masteries and is less reliant on his graveyard as a result.
Oh. Interesting. All right. Well, we need to resync our video here, so we're just going to pop back to us for just a second here, and then we'll get back down. Apologies for that. Interesting matchup, Luis. I really like that Sam has decided to go against the grain. And, in game one, we saw one deck can actually outgrind the other, but boy, it seemed precarious at any point there. If João would have found, one of those really heavy hitters, the tables all of a sudden get turned in like a huge way. And it looks like we're back in the action here.
Playing red-black is not for the faint of heart. You don't kill that fast. You got a bunch of 1/1s and 2/1s and 1/3s, but while you do strip their hand, if they just draw one of their good cards, they could be right back in it. So you end up in a spot where you just have to accept, hey, 28% of the time they're going to draw the card on the turn they need it. When I've done everything perfectly, and I'll just lose those games. But over time, I'm going to win more than I'll lose if I enact my game plan.
Looks like Sam's going to kick things off here with Cruxa and start to force the issue.
Solid, just a little bit of disruption there. Just trying to grind the opponent out. If you're able to take out their card draw, Inquisition their Narsets or make it so Mizzix Mastery is not going to work, then things like Cruxa can, grind the Jeskai deck to dust there.
Mm-hmm. First decision point here, do you cycle Shark Typhoon? Feels like with no red mana available and nothing else going on, you probably just have to.
You really want to find Teferi at some point here, because landing a Teferi on an empty board, that's an easy path to victory.
And we're going to see Kolaghan's Command. It just keeps chipping away at the opponent's hand. Most of the time, discard a card and your opponent gets to choose it isn't really such a incredible effect, but it really does add up when a lot of your cards have that text on them.
And here we see the little used combo of make you discard a card with K command, get back Cruxa as just like a build your own Mind Rot that costs 5 mana.
Yeah, this is really brute force that we see here. Nothing subtle about the way that Sam is approaching the matchup. And Moreira's going to get rid of a Lightning Helix, as it's not really doing much here. And unfortunately for him, he's not really doing much here either. And the combo there for Sam Rolph, Village Rites gets fired off while Crux is still on the battlefield.
And this is
into land Thoughtseize.
I mean, this is just the Arcanist deck out-carding the Jeskai deck straight up. There's no, I'm playing an Arcanist or Young Pyromancer. It's just, I'm grinding you down with Cruxas and Thoughtseizes and Village Rites. It's a really impressive setup, and it kind of shows why Sam likes this matchup. The Jeskai deck has to have some amount of cards like Lightning Helix and Day of Judgment, because they do need to respect the fact that the Rakdos deck has a bunch of creatures. But when you draw those and they just draw a bunch of discard and card draw spells, it doesn't really line up all that well.
No, and even Shark Typhoon here doesn't look great. You can make a 3/3 Shark, but it's very likely that you're going to lose whatever card you cycle into anyway. Also of note here, there is still no red mana available for João. Now, currently with no hand, it's not super important, but, there's a lot of cards he can find, and yeah, he's going to have to get rid of this Magma Opus here. Though, I will say having that in the graveyard isn't the worst case scenario.
Definitely not, and it means that if you draw a Torrential Gearhulk and a 6th land, you can get right back into this, in fact, pull ahead.
Yeah, and really, that actually sums up why this brute force hand disruption plan from Sam is important. Like, you do find yourself in situations like this, and look at this, Crux is going to come back. There isn't even a card to take, and the double red card comes off the top of the library. So now it's just an outright race, but I'll tell you, I like Cruxa in these races. That damage adds up really quickly.
And all of a sudden you see the game plan go from attrition to just getting the opponent dead, because Cruxa does not mess around. I mean, the Castle Ardenvale is going to be able to block it here, but Cruxa punishing João with the discard, with extra damage, it's just going to make it very difficult to come back here.
Okay, there's the chump block.
Effectively a forced play there.
That's right. There's Dreadhorde Arcanist hitting the battlefield as well. Now, I don't think there's a graveyard currently for Sam. He had to escape away most of it, but we see Angrath's Rampage stem the bleeding and also put a card into the yard. See Fame sitting there as well for Sam. There's a red source, Steam Vents, but Joel's looking at it like, well, not a great option here.
You do have to play it because you need your 6 land, you need red mana, but yeah, this is getting tough. The once again, the combo of Fame plus Dreadhorde Arcanist is going to let you cast a card from your graveyard the Arcanist normally couldn't. And so let's say you cast Angrath's Rampage from the yard using Fame. João makes a token and sacks that token in response, then gets to trade the Shark token for the Arcanist, but takes 9 from Cruxa, going down to 6 here. That doesn't sound that bad for Sam, to be honest.
Yeah, I think I would sign up for that. Is this red-black deck a value deck, or is it an anti-value deck? Because, like, I can't decide.
It's kind of both, where it generates a lot of value, it's got all these combos, but it also, decks that play Cruxa kind of want both players to end up on no cards in hand.
Right.
That's just kind of where the game trends. So it's simultaneously both like one of those black discard, we both have nothing on turn 4 decks, while also being a deck that can actually generate a lot of extra cards and material kind of out of nowhere.
And now really starting to become a forced issue here as this Cruxa, once both players get down to 0, just tends to take over the game, and that's exactly what's happening. We see the block, but down to 6 means Crux is going to be applying massive heat here for basically the rest of the game. And in fact, looks like he's going to start looping here down to 3. And it's a mountain off the top of the library, and that's going to be it. Sam Rolph proves correct with that decision, at least in this round, and has now rocked his way to victory twice over Jeskai. So 2-0 here for Sam with the Arcanist deck, and he may be onto something here, Luis.